Hello guys, Charles here and welcome back to my channel. Now today I want to share with you something which I wish I had been shown when I first started playing, because it would have saved me a huge amount of confusion in terms of knowing which scale to use over chords. And to be more specific, we're not actually learning scales at all here. We're learning how to build and create scales for ourselves. This means that we may be playing things that we don't know the names of, we don't know what the scale's called, but we know for a fact that it works, and that's the most important thing. And especially if you're a newer player and you're not really very confident, the great thing about this method is everything comes from the page. So you can pretty much feel 100% confident, rely on it, because all the stuff on the page was written by a master musician, by the composer. So to get the most out of this video, you do need to know two things. The first is you need to know your note names on the guitar. I've done a video about that up here. And secondly, you need to know the notes of chords. So again, I've done a video on that. You can check that out up here. Thirdly, whichever tune you're working through, you need to know the melody. Now that seems to some of us a very obvious thing, but I think a lot of us have gone through a stage where we've played over backing tracks so much that we realise we've never actually known the melody. I've talked about that before, turning up to jams and being asked to play the melody and realising, oh, well, I only know how to play over the changes. So we do need to know the melody. Doesn't matter whether you know it off by heart or whether you're reading it from the page, but you will need the melody for this. So for an example today, we're going to look at the tune The Girl from Ipanema. I'm just looking in the real book, 6th edition version here. So everything we need to understand this method happens in the first 8 bars of this tune. And I've chosen this tune, by the way, because I specifically was asked about it by an online student in one of their very first lessons. They've been getting pestered by this particular chord, the G flat 7 flat 5, and saying, well, how do I know what scale to play over that? And so if that is you, or if you're looking at that and you think, oh, I don't have a clue, then this should help you out. So our very first chord is an F major 7, so F major 7. So we know the notes of an F major 7 are F, A, C, and E. Now remember, most scales are somewhere between 5 and 8 notes long. So we've already got 4 notes there, so we're basically almost at a scale. Let's have a look at the melody now and see which other notes are included that weren't accounted for in the chord. Well, our very first note of the tune is a G. So straight away we can add G into our major 7 chord. And we've got a pentatonic scale now, a 5-note scale. Therefore, we are now at a stage where we could just use that to improvise if we wanted to. Let's see if there's any other notes in those first 2 bars of F major 7. So there we've got D as well. Now D's not in F major 7, but it's in our melody. So we can add G and D to our F major 7 chord. And that one works really nicely on the guitar actually, because we can use this 3-note per string shape. And that's our scale. Now, again, if you are someone who understands how scales work and you know this and you're just watching this because you're curious, you've probably got a few things going through your head now, like, oh, why not just do the major scale and all this? Yeah, but this is targeted at people who don't have any concept of scales. Also, though, if you are someone who does know scales, and you would usually say, oh, F major 7, I'll play an F major scale, maybe there's a reason why B flat was omitted by the composers here. Maybe there's a reason they didn't want us playing that sound. And so I'd lean more on what they want us to play rather than just our theoretical knowledge that, oh, well, that works. I'd look at the melody and go, well, there's maybe a reason that they don't want us to play B flat, so maybe I should avoid that, or be cautious of it anyway. Next up, G7. So we know the notes of G7 are G, B, D, and F. So again, that's already 4 notes there, very close to a scale. Let's look at the melody and see what else we've got. So we've got G, which is already in the chord. We've got an E, which is new, so we can now add that in. We've got a D, which is already in the chord. Another G already in the chord, another E, another D, and an F, which is already in the chord. So you see here, most of the melody is already built from chord tones anyway. And this is one of the greatest tunes of all time. So they didn't need many more notes, so why should we? Why do we need 7, 8, 9 notes? No, we can just stick to basically the chord tones with a few extra notes. So on the G7, we can just play G, B, D, E, F. Which again works really nicely in a kind of stretched 3-note per string type shape. So we've got G, B, D, E, F. That gives us a really nice dominant pentatonic scale. So if we can't do something interesting with those 5 notes, remember McCoy Tyner was the pentatonic master, everything he did was pretty much 5 notes per chord. If we can't do something interesting with those 5 notes, then that's our problem, not the scale's problem. Next up, G minor 7. So here we've got G, B flat, D and F as our chord tones, so we're almost at a scale. And let's look at the melody. We've got F, that's in the chord already. We've got D, that's in the chord already. We've got C, that's not in the chord, so we can definitely add him in. And that gives us our minor pentatonic. So we know that on that chord we can definitely use a minor pentatonic. However, we've also at the end of that bar got an E. Now, you could interpret this as an anticipation, which means that really it's a note for the next bar that's been brought early. Or you could experiment with trying it out. There's always with these things, of course, there's extra notes, there's things like ornaments which can add notes into the melody which they're not really supposed to be part of a scale. And just the more you do this, you'll start to realise which notes are and aren't really there. You know, some of these bebop ornaments, they're just kind of these little tricks. They're not really notes in their own right. But don't worry about that for today. Let's try adding this E into our scale. So we've got G, B flat, C, D, E, F. Sounds great. So that scale is going to work really nicely over that G minor 7 chord. Again, it doesn't matter if we know what these scales are called. Some of you will. But as long as you're playing the right notes, no one cares if you know all the fancy names for scales. It's great if you do, but no one cares if you can't use them, if you can't play well. So as long as you know these notes and you can experiment with them, you can experiment playing melodies with them, that's all that matters. And finally, the chord that this video was inspired by, the G flat 7 flat 5 chord. Let's have a little look. So G flat 7 flat 5 is a 4-note chord. And that's the notes G flat, F flat, B flat, and D double flat. Now, in plain English, that's G flat, E, B flat, and C. So those are our notes. Again, we've got 4 notes to start with that are very good. Those alone are going to be perfectly usable on that particular chord. However, let's look at the melody again. So there we've got E or F flat, which is already in the chord. We've got C, which again is D double flat, is already in the chord. And we've got B flat, which is the 3rd, it's already in the chord. However, something we can do is we can look elsewhere in the melody and see if there's anywhere else where there's any extra notes with the same chord. So if I look further in the piece, I can see that in the final A section, we've got C, E, E, D. So we've got a D in the melody now, which we can add into that, which gives us our G flat, B flat, C, which is technically D double flat, D natural, F flat, which is E, and back to G flat. So we end up with this scale. Now, again, if you know about scales, that might look very similar to some other scales that you know. And if you don't know about scales, then that's what you play. That's your notes. The piece has given those the thumbs up. It has approved them and said, these are the sounds I definitely want to hear on that chord type. So what we had to do on that particular one, and I'd suggest you do this for all the others, really I should have been doing this from the beginning, but is looking for the same chord elsewhere in the piece. So later on in the piece we get the same type of chord, G flat 7 flat 5, so whatever happened there, let's say the melody was totally different, you would just look for any new notes that you haven't already accounted for, and you would add them to your possible scale. So there, Over the Girl from Ipanema, we've created 4 scales that are going to all work really, really nicely. So over the F major 7, we were playing F, G, A, C, D, E. Over the G7, we were playing G, B, D, E, and F. Classic walking bass line. However, again, if we look later on in the piece, the final A section, it actually finishes with an A in that bar, so we could add an A on that G7 as well, which gives us a 3-note per string shape. Over the G minor 7, we were playing G, B flat, C, D, E, and F. Now again, if we look at the end of the piece, there's another G minor 7 there. That one's actually got an A in it as well, so we can have G, A, B flat, C, D, E, F. So we've managed to go from starting with a pentatonic scale when we first talked about that chord, to adding in all these other notes, which are technically called Dorian, but you don't need to know that. You just need to know, well, those are the notes I'm allowed to use, because the melody's told me so. The melody's given me the thumbs up. And finally, our G flat 7 flat 5. Our final scale here was G flat, B flat, C, D, E, and G flat. And the proper name for those notes, G flat, B flat, D double flat, D, F flat, and G flat. So hopefully you can see the power of this. You never need to think of scales again. You literally just go through the tune, compare the melody to the chords, and you know that you're basically getting the composer's seal of approval. You're getting a thumbs up from the composer. Now, some tunes only have one melody note on a chord, so therefore you're basically, I mean, if it's a chord tone, you're only going to be playing chord tones on that particular chord. You're just going to be playing the 4 notes of the chord. However, the more you do this, if you do this for 10, 15, 20 tunes, you start to notice those patterns, and you'll just instinctively remember, oh, I had that sound in this other tune and I was allowed to do X, Y, and Z. So why can't I do it on this tune? And you'll start to experiment, bring those things through. And you don't need to sit and remember lists and lists of endless scales. You allow the page to ask you which notes it wants you to use. It just says, please use these notes, and you go, okay, I'll just use those notes. And you can work exclusively on practicing the piece of music, improvising over it, using the material drawn entirely from the page. So I hope you found that one useful. If you did, please do give it a like, subscribe, ding that notification bell, and share with any friends or on any forums that you think would find this one useful. And as always, I hope you're all doing very well, getting plenty of practice in, and I very much look forward to seeing you in the next one. Cheers!